Hello there, this is Dr. Esa again. I hope you're enjoying the Greek classes. Today we're going to look at the Greek relative pronouns. So the relative pronouns in English, who and whom refer to humans. For example, the teacher whom the students love won the award. Then we have another relative pronoun which, used to refer generally to objects. And then we have that, which can refer to either human beings or objects, such as the glass that broke, or I helped the boy that fell on a bike. And finally, we have whose, which usually refers to humans, but sometimes also can be used to refer to objects. So this should be pretty straightforward regarding the relative pronouns in English. So here's a chart of Greek relative pronouns. The Greek relative pronouns function in the same way as the English ones, except that it has the case, number, and gender. So we have here hos, who, which, or that, and he in the feminine and ho in neuter. So just pay attention that here we have the neuter relative pronoun in nominative singular, and it closely resembles the masculine article as in ho logos. The exception is that it has that tiny accent mark, so don't get confused with that. Some of the other relative pronouns also have that same difficulty, so that you might confuse them with the articles. Now, obviously, when you see that in the context, you should be able to distinguish that from the article. As mentioned, the relative pronouns also have the case and the number. So looking at genitive singular, who, and then obviously feminine and neuter, so his and who. So you can see that the translation would be of who, of which, of whose. Or ho, he, ho would be to whom or to which. Obviously, it could be also, as you remember from dative, in or with or for. Accusative would be hon, hen, and ho. And then in the plural, nominative plural, hoi, hai, and ha. Genitive is all three are the same, hon. Dative, hois, hais, hois, and accusative plural, whose, has, and ha. Again, noting the similarity or the identical forms in neuter, nominative, and accusative in singular and plural. Now notice that when we have a plural relative pronoun, we cannot really properly translate that into English because we have same forms in singular and in plural. As such, the forms should be easily recognizable, and the cases should also be easy, as long as you don't confuse them with the article. But if you know and remember the case endings for first and second declension nouns, then you should have no problems identifying and translating the Greek relative pronouns. So let's look at a couple of examples. Here first is scripture from Matthew 10:38. So hos u lambane ton stauron autu kai akoluthei opiso mu uk estin mu axios. So this is always the relative pronoun, who, that, or which. So we would need to figure out if that relative pronoun is talking about an object or person. So that, let's try with the that first. That not takes the cross of his and follows after or behind me, not is of me worthy. So obviously you probably recognize that we would have to use who rather than not. So Jesus is talking about a person who does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. And obviously this is not a question, so it would be better to translate whoever or he or she who does not. So whoever would be a better translation. So as you can see that we have to be somewhat flexible exactly what word we use to translate the relative pronoun here. The trouble, if we only going to use who, then it would seem that it is a question, but relative pronouns obviously are not used to form questions. We have different kinds of pronouns, interrogative pronouns for that. So we'd have probably the best way would be whoever does not take up their cross. So let's take another example. Idu ho aster hon eidon ente anatole pro egen autus. So behold the star which they saw or they had seen ente anatole in the east or in the rising of the sun. Pro egen was leading or led them. So now you can see that hon is in accusative case because it's the direct object of the verb eidon. Now remember, you don't have to be able to translate from English to Greek, but just to take a note of the case and how it functions in the sentence in order to be able to translate. So translation in this situation cannot be who because we're talking about an object, not a person. So whenever we translate, we have to be aware of the fact that we see whether the context would most clearly justify translation who, which, or that. And obviously we need to take into consideration the case and the number as well. And sometimes we need to add some words for clarification, such as he or she, like he who or she who or that which as a demonstrative pronoun in order to clarify what the relative pronoun is really pointing to. So relative pronouns in Greek should be fairly straightforward, but here are some general guidelines. The number and gender of relative pronouns are connected to its antecedent. In other words, the word that it's connected to. Case is determined by its function in the relative clause, not in the sentence. And I think the previous example indicated that already. And finally, translation of the relative pronoun depends on the function of the relative clause. In other words, should we use who or which or that or even whoever or he who or she who or something like that. And to practice, complete workbook page 53, warm-up, exercise and parsings, and then homework. We have page 55, translation sentences 6 and 7.